give the recording a minute to get started again.
Erica, is this furniture or?
More like maybe like sculptural or like, yeah, no, not furniture, but yeah, maybe just like a design feature or something like that.
Like an installment
Sure.
sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a common thing. Okay, so here I'll just clear those detail lines from the floor, and so then going to model in place, we'll start just with generic models as the category, because that gives you all the tools. And so we'll call it, let's do it, I was saying installation. Okay, now we've been focusing on extrusions, and look, if you can make things with extrusions, it's always best, because in real life, builders tend to make things that are like that. I know if you want to get things that are more sculptural, then you want to look at some of these other tools. So we'll look at blend. So with the blend tool, you can get fairly sculptural results using one shape on the bottom. So I'm going to just draw, in fact, I'll start with a spline for something different. So I'm going to do a spline, which is an irregular curve. Now, the problem with splines, it can be quite difficult to connect them. So even to themselves. So here, after I get close to the first point, I'm going to stop and then just connect those 2 points with an arc or a line. Doesn't really matter which in this case, but I think an arc is what I'll use. Yep, that'll do. Okay, so I've got a closed shape for my base, and then I'm going to click Edit Top and draw another spline. And the tip I can give you here is try to start them at a similar point. They don't need to be the same point, but you want these connecting shapes to line up. So I'm going to make it, again, a different shape to the first one. Okay, and so then again, I'm just going to join those two ends with an arc. Okay, and then I'm going to set my depth or my end to 2400, just so it's got a bit of height, so I can potentially walk through this thing, which is really what I'm thinking of. So I'll finish that now, and then go back to the and then finish model, just so you can see how it looks. So I'll go to the camera view, and you can see now we've got this form that's maybe a bit more sculptural than what you get with the other, extrusion and other tools like that. So because it's blending from one shape to another, you can of course change the height, and we can change those two shapes. So if I go back to Edit and Place, select it again, and then I can go to either Edit Top or Edit Base. So if I go to Edit Top, of course I'm changing the top shape, which is the one that it goes to at the top. And then if I go back into the plan, it's probably easier to see it. So maybe I'll make this, I want to make the whole thing a bit smaller, so I'm just going to use the scale tool and make it, I don't know, 3/4 the size, so 0.75 is my scale factor. Oops. And then we'll just click a point in the middle to scale it down. So that might do, and I'll finish that and again just show you in perspective how that's looking now, so you can see it's just changed the shape. Maybe just going a bit further with that, if I go back to the plan again and go to Edit Top, I might just move that whole shape across so it's a bit clearer, then you can see how the shapes blend. So now if I move this across, it should be much clearer that this is the top. And you'll see again now, if you look at it, the top now is moved right across. So that can give you pretty interesting results if you think about what would happen if you blend two quite different shapes. And so again, maybe to make that a bit more rational though, I might go back and edit the top and just move this shape back over the first one. And then also think about how you can combine these shapes with other things. So maybe if I want to have an opening that goes through this thing that I've made, instead of making a solid shape, I'm going to make a void. Now the key here is that I haven't clicked Finish Model. Before clicking Finish Model, I've gone back to the Create tab, and that's where I get the modeling tools. Because I know a lot of people, what they'll do is Finish Model and then go back to here, Model in Place, and make new things that way, but it won't work with things you've made previously. So I need the void to work with this. So again, I need to be working with that family by selecting it, going to Edit and Place, back onto the Create tab. I can then make new things. So again, I'm just going to make a void extrusion, and then I'll put a shape. This is maybe the opening that I want to be able to walk through. Okay, so there we are. It can be bigger than the hole I'm trying to cut, that's fine. And then I'm going to set the extrusion in to normal door height, which is 2100 or even 2 meters actually would be okay for this. Tick to finish. And then if you look in 3D view, you can see now I've got an opening going through my my shape. Okay, so even just with blends and extrusions, you can get interesting results. If you want to go further than that, just finish this. So also remember, with all of those things, you can use them in different planes. So just like I showed earlier with the extrusions you've got there coming out from the wall, you can have blends that work the same way. They can also be set to start with different planes. But then again, if you want to go even further than that, then you need to look at using massing, and that's under the Massing and Site tab. You have in place mass there. So I'll just give you a few little examples with that. So with massing, you actually have much more powerful modeling tools than what I've shown you previously. So here we've got all the shapes options. You might even notice there we've got a few shapes options that normally aren't there for the other drawing tools. So this one has a bit more. But I'm still just going to use splines here. And then I'll do a spline, then I'll do another one. So I'll just do a spline very quickly. Okay, so I've got a sort of a complex shape there, and you could not use the wall tool to make that shape. So this is really the only way to make a wall like this. Right, and then one of the things you can do with massing that you can't do normally is you can extrude something that isn't closed. Okay, so I can select this shape. It's not a closed shape, obviously. It's only a single line, but I can still extrude it. So with massing, it's different. You don't have the same modeling tools as you have normally. You find this Create Form button basically does it all. So you've got two options, solid form and void form. I'm going to choose solid form. And now if I show you in the perspective view, we've got a single surface made from a spline. All right, and I can just change the height this way. You've got these X, Y, Z gizmos, which again are something that you only get with massing in Revit. So I can use those to adjust the height of these things. I can also, this is where it gets really interesting, just trying to get a better view. I can also edit individual points. So this is where you might hear me saying sometimes it's a bit like SketchUp, but SketchUp on steroids. It's much more powerful and a much better modeler than SketchUp. So if I adjust these points, notice how I can change the height at one end. At the other end, it's still at the height it was. So I've got a sloping wall now. And you can take it much further than that. So I can make this spline on the top different as well. So now this is almost like a blend. So remember before I was saying don't do curtains, but if you want to, this is going to give you something like that. Right, so that's already something that you couldn't make normally with the other modeling tools. Now that is still a surface. So now to finish that and make it a wall, I'll finish the mass. And then under the Massing and Site tab, go to the wall tool there, wall by face is what it's called. And now I can choose any wall type. So I'll go just to, I'm going to go to brick 110, pick that surface, and now I've got a brick wall. That's a very unusual shape for a brick wall, but that's still, I mean, Frank Gehry can do it, so why can't we? There we are. So that's another option for modeling. I'm going to show you one more. So I'll do it, I'm running out of space on this level, so I'll get rid of the hexagon, stick it there. Okay, so back to the massing and site tab, I'll make another in-place mass. And this time I'm going to simply draw a rectangle. So then I'm going to select the rectangle and just like before, click Create Form. Now I'm just going to temporarily finish that so that I can make a camera view that shows that area properly. Right, I can see the mass up close now. So then I'll select it to go back and edit it, just like you, hopefully you're getting used to, edit in place. So just like before, I can select the corner points. So again, this is just like SketchUp, but again, maybe a bit more powerful even. So I can adjust the edges individually. I can adjust points individually. And then I can build off these surfaces. So I'm going to select one of the sides. Here you need to be comfortable with the tab option to get different selections. So I've used tab there to highlight that face on the right. And then I'm going to go to Create Form to make a new extrusion off that side. And then I can keep modeling from there. So, so again, we'll just select one of the edges or one of the points. Now, sometimes you'll see it's locked when you model in this way, so you can always unlock to then be able to adjust points as I was previously. So you can get very complex geometry this way, often with a fairly simple starting point. I can't go back now. These points are locked because they're connecting to different forms, but it's still a pretty flexible modeling tool set. And so the final thing I'll show you there is that I can also add edges or profiles. So I'll go to Add Profile. And you can see there now I can build in extra, essentially these are extra control points. Did I get that one? Yeah. So these allow us to put things like curved edges in for the different sides. Right, so it takes a bit of practice, but you'll see it's a really powerful set of modeling tools that have been in Revit for a long time, but again, does take some getting used to. It's very different to the sort of modeling that you might have tried. But again, oh yeah, I'll tell you a really important shortcut there is spacebar to switch between these orange arrows, which are related to the edge that they come from, or the red, green, blue arrows, which are for working with X, Y, and Z. So again, it's a very powerful approach to modeling in Revit. And so now remember, that's a mass. So if I go to a realistic view, you'll see it's just a semi-transparent thing. That's not really meant for your final renders. Oh yeah, so the top face of the shape's round. I'll show you that too. Yes, I'll do that. Yep, next, that's a good one. Okay, so just remember, to use massing, you really still need to convert that into a physical thing. So normally you would convert this into walls. So using the wall tool, just like I showed you before, on the massing and site tab, you use that wall by face, and I'm just going to choose a thin wall, the 30mm toilet wall. It's fine, and I can pick all these surfaces now and make them a solid thing. So it's a pretty amazing set of tools, you'll find. Yeah, so that's a really interesting thing. And if you have a look on my YouTube channel, I've posted some videos recently which give some other examples using that massing approach to modeling. But for what Erica was just asking about with the rounded corners, that's a specific thing that does come up a lot. So I'm going to show you that too. So I'm going to go back to the usual modeling tools, again, just using model in place. And this time, I think since I'm going to be making casework, I will use casework. It's going to give me the same tools as I got with generic models a moment ago anyway. So let's say we want a lounge or some sort of bench seating that has some nice rounded edges. That's a nice thing to have. So I'll start with an extrusion, and then I might just draw a rectangle, keep it simple, and then I'll do another one. So I'm doing like an L-shaped lounge. And yes, I know I've got overlapping edges. Thanks for telling me, but here we are. So I'm going to join all these together and just get rid of any unnecessary lines. So I've got my little L-shaped shape, and I'll go and make the depth even. So let's say 750. A lot of lounge chairs these days are much deeper than that, but this should still be okay. So I've got my my base shape, and I'll set the depth or the end there to 400. So I'm going to finish that and then just show you again what it looks like in perspective. So I'll just get these other things out of the way. Okay, so sorry, just 1 second. Okay, so here we are. So in this camera view, I'm just going to use the navigation wheel. Oops, it's gone. There we are, navigation wheel to adjust that camera view to be able to see what I've just made a bit more clearly. Okay, so then we'll go back and put some rounded edges onto that. So again, I'll select it and go to edit and place. And then usually for things like this, you need to use a sweep. So I'll go back to the floor plan to start creating that. So under the Create tab, I'm going to go to Void Forms and then Void Sweep. And then go to Sketch Path. And then trace around the front edge of my lounge shape where I want the rounded edges to be. So I want the rounded edges on all of those front edges, right? So, but not the backs. So I don't need to trace over those. So I'll finish this path, but then remember I'm still working on the sweep. So now I'm going to go to, I'm going to go and work on the profile, but I want to just show you that I already have a section that's looking in the direction I need. So when you're making a path for a sweep, make sure you realize that it'll also set a plane for your profile. So this is my profile plane that came up automatically. I might just show you that in the 3D view so you can see it. It's across. So that's the plane that I need to draw my profile on. And so again, for that, I'll go to the section view that I just showed you. So you may need to set up a section view in advance for this. So here, there's my section, which you can see is looking towards that shape or that extrusion that I've modeled, and there's my profile plane. So it's down on the floor because that's where my path is. I've drawn it all on the floor, but that's fine. I can still draw the next thing where I want it to be. So to draw it, I've got to go to select profile up the top. It's a bit annoying. Why is it doing that? So sorry, it just switched to the profile option without giving me the option to sketch. So I had to go back here to the modify sweep tab to again get the right option there to edit the profile. So after you click select profile, normally it should just give you that. So here, select profile, and now you can see I can click edit profile. So then I'm going to draw an arc, right, that gives the rounding that I want on the corner. And it's probably a bit hard to see because I've got my line weights on, So I'm going to scan on thin lines so you can see the shape, and I actually missed it anyway, so I'll draw that again. So I'll just draw a new arc, maybe a bit bigger. So the secret with something like this is to draw the first line that you set out for your arc at 45 degrees, and that should make the arc turn out properly. So I've got that now, that's a quarter circle. And then I'll draw lines to connect the two ends of my arc. So I've got a little corner shape, and that hopefully you can all see is what I'm trying to cut off from the corner of the extrusion. So I might turn my line weights back on. It's a bit harder to see, but if I change the scale there to 1 to 20, that's kind of the best of both worlds, because I can see the line weights, but I can also see the shape. So I'll finish that now. Now that hasn't completed the sweep, that's just the profile that I finished. So I'll go back to the 3D view so you can see, so not that one, the other one. There we go. So there's the profile that I've just drawn. The path is done as well, that's on the floor. So when I click tick now, it's going to combine the profile with this path, or in other words, sweep the profile along the path. And now that gives us that rounding. So it's good in a way, because this is the way you build. You would build it square first, and then you would round off the corners after you had made it like that. So it's a good thing to understand construction. But I might just take it a little bit further. So I'll just check to see if there's a question. Different heights, yes, that's right. So yeah, Maria's spot on. So yeah, different parts you would draw it. You could always start it in a floor plan to set the level if you needed the base level to be set to a particular story. But then absolutely to work with the heights, go into your section view, it makes it much easier. And so here, if I go back to the section that I showed you, where I was drawing the profile, I can of course still select the extrusion there and adjust the height of it. No problem. Of course, now the rounding is cutting through where it was, down lower. We'd have to move that up, which I'm not going to show you. I'm sure you could work that out. But what I'm going to show you instead is how to change the path, and also maybe I'll show you how to make that radius a bit less. So if I go back to the floor plan, which one? Sorry, none of these. So it's that one that I just saw. There we are. Okay, so here what I want is, of course I've got the rounding in elevation, but I haven't got it in plan. I want these corners to be now rounded in the plan. So that means I need to go and change the extrusion first. So a great option for rounding off corners is fillet arc in your draw panel. I can choose that last arc tool before the spline button is fillet arc. If you haven't tried that one. So I'll choose these two lines and then put a radius in between them. So I'm going to make it fairly small. So I'll try, I can't make it too small, or it won't work. So I'll try 80, I think should be okay. I know maybe I'll just be safe, I'll be a bit larger, so maybe 100. And so then I want to keep doing the others the same radius. So I'm going to go up here now and just tick radius and put in 100. Just saves you a bit of time. Then I can just go around picking these pairs of lines, and that's quickly going to round off all those corners in only the extrusion, of course. So if we look at that in 3D now, you'll see that the corners look a bit strange because the sweep doesn't have those rounded corners in the path. So now all I need to do to make that void sweep follow the changes I've made to the extrusion is go and edit that path by selecting the sweep, the void, going to edit sweep, and then I might go back to the floor plan. And then it's funny, there's no edit path button. You just choose sketch path to go back and edit it. So there's my path, and I can simply go to my fillet arc tool, tick radius, use the same setting, 100. So now you can see my path for the sweep is following what I did to the extrusion. Tick to finish. And then now the moment of truth. when I go to finish, yes, it's worked, good. So you'll often get to this point and see that it'll give you an error, because if I'd made that profile have a larger radius than I put onto the extrusion, then it wouldn't work. The geometry wouldn't be possible. So just watch out for that. If you make the radiuses too big, usually for the profile, it can cause some problems. Shape you have right now, how do you make the entire top rounded rather than flat? Not sure what you mean. So the entire top rounded. So do you mean like a barrel vaulted shape? Like a 3D arch? Yeah, okay. So if you're doing things like that, where you really after rounded shapes in a different plane, then just go back to what I was showing Chanel earlier. So I might just do that example again, but this time with a curve. So so again, back to model in place. In fact, so I'm going to do one step before this. So I'm not going to do it. I was about to do it on this wall, but because I'm assuming you want maybe things that are floating in space or not up against a wall all the time, what I'm going to do is just go back into my plan view, and I'm going to make a reference plane. And I'm not even going to do it in line with the wall. So I'm going to do that at an angle, just so you can see this could be any angle. Right, and then the secret with reference planes, if you want to model on them, the secret is to give them a name. So I'm going to call this, let's call it profile plane. Okay, so now I'll do the rest in perspective. So I'll go back to my 3D view. We can't see the plane there, but it is there. So now I'll go to model in place, and I'll stick with casework. So now I'll go to extrusion, and then before I draw anything, I'm going to go to set. And then now you'll see I can choose the plane, and clever me, I've given it the same name as I'd given another one before. So let's see, I can work it out using show. Yeah, so it's not that one. You shouldn't have this problem because you probably will have different names, so it must be this one. Yes, okay, so that's why show is so useful, because you can always see the plane that you're drawing on with that tool. Okay, so now back to drawing my extrusion. I'll just draw some lines for the base and then the sides. And then I can connect those with an arc or even a spline. Right, so an arc would be okay. That's going to give us a rounded sort of top. But if you want to get something more sculptural, instead of drawing an arc, you could draw a spline. So remember, with splines, you can always go back and adjust those points afterwards. So is that the sort of thing you're after, Erica? Yeah, perfect, good. Yeah, oh yeah, so if you want that, that's more of a dome. Yeah, so it's a similar idea. So, okay, so if you want more of a dome type thing, then you need to use a revolve. So I'll show you that as well, because it's a related idea. So here, back to create, this time I'll go to revolve. So this is only going to work because I already had the plane set up. So with revolves, especially for domes like the one you just showed, then yeah, it's really important that you understand how to make a reference plane, and to be able to draw on that to make you revolve. So I already have that reference plane though, so I'm going to go now to revolve and then draw on that plane by again going to set, making sure it's got the one that I've named, profile plane, that's correct. And then I'll use show just to be doubly sure of the plane that I'm drawing on. Okay, so to make a dome sort of shape, you generally draw a quarter circle. So let's draw an arc. So back to lines. Okay, and so then before I finish it, I have to draw an axis line. So it's going to revolve around this axis. So I'm just going to draw that from the top there and take it up. But then I might drag it away so that you can see the axis doesn't need to be touching that shape. It's annoying. That number that I can't even see keeps coming up. How annoying. There we go. Okay, so again, I just dragged it away so that you can see that axis separate to the shape. Okay, so now I'll finish my revolve, and it's rotated that around the axis. So that's another good option, and when you think about it, you can do a lot with revolves. So maybe I'll just do one last example. So you could have a spline that forms the outline of your revolve. I'm going to do something hopefully slightly interesting. Yeah, so then I'll maybe just change it a bit so it's, yeah. Okay, so again, it still needs to be a closed shape, so I've got to connect those two endpoints. And then, actually I want this to be a bit flatter on the top, so I'm just going to bring that curve. Yeah. So it's going to be huge, but you know, I'll probably scale it down normally. And here I won't worry about that. I just want to get it done. So there we are. There's my axis. I'll finish that one, and you'll see it's going to evolve that, you know, around, and that can give you some really interesting results. So is that the sort of thing you're looking at? And hopefully that'll give you some ideas. But yeah, that revolve you've put up, that will on top of that shape. Yeah, that definitely will work well with a revolve, but you know, maybe you can take it even further. So maybe I'll just isolate this so you can all see the finished result there. So, yeah. Again, that's without even using the advanced massing modeling tools. Just with extrusions and revolves and sweeps, you can do most things. I wouldn't worry about swept blends. It's actually a bit of a tedious tool that often doesn't give you what you want. So, yeah, hopefully you'll be able to do it that way. Make two different heights, like marking a cut line between two parts. Make a cut line between two parts and then changing the height. So do you mean like avoid cutting an extrusion at a certain height? Is that what you mean, Rena? One part is higher than the other. Yeah, so that would just be two different things. So what? Just give me an example. What are you trying to make that needs the two heights? Is it shelving or?
Sorry, I'll just turn my mic on just so it's easier.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I'm actually referring to another project that we've got because we're doing Barangaroo as well.
Yeah.
But basically in the section part, there's two different heights because the building has like two different heights. I was asking like, how do we make those two different heights, if that makes sense?
Well, levels will be the first thing.
Okay.
So maybe we'll just quickly go over that. So I'll just switch back. Okay, so I've actually got Barangaroo here. I'll just open that up. Here we are. Okay, so if you look at this in section, you can see it already has levels set up for a lot of the different heights that were necessary.
Mm-hmm.
So just remember, so on the architecture tab, you've got the level tool there.
Oh wait, no, it's the other.
So you just
It's
break
another
up.
Barangaroo project. Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, yep.
It's a different project. It's only one story. It's the, what do you call it?
Yeah.
It's a retail store.
Oh, you're doing that one down the bottom, yeah. But
Yeah.
still, I've got that one here as well. But I won't worry about opening it. It's still the same idea. So you still would
Okay.
make levels for all the main heights, but you don't need them for everything. So you can also make reference planes in a section view
Okay.
for the in-between levels. So if you don't want to make a full level, you can make reference planes
Mm-hmm.
just to mark those heights. And that can be handy if you need to snap a lot of things to the same height. So I can set this to, I don't know, 2000. So that way, if we go back to make an extrusion or something, or let's say we've got a couple, so I'll just do one more. So I'll do, so that one we've got, and then I'll copy it for another height. All right, so we've got those two things. And then now if we go back to the plan, so I'm in section 5. So I'll go back to my floor plan. All right, so section 5 is that one. That's good. Okay, so I might just make a new extrusion with model in place. And this time I'll set the category to wall, since that's what I'm making. So I'll just make an extrusion and make a funny shaped wall. And it's surprising how often you see these unusual walls and other things these days. They do exist. Okay, so I'll finish that, and then now back into my section, I can then simply stretch that to snap to my reference planes, which of course I didn't make long enough, so I just might go and stretch those across. So I'm just going to go back to the plan to get my extrusion. It's there, but it's behind something. Let's see where it is. Oh, there it is. Okay, so that's just a bit hard to see, but there it is. And now I can stretch that in section to line up with the reference planes. That usually works pretty well. So is that what you mean? Doing?
Yeah, if you like, say for example, if you split that in half and make them two different heights, how would you do that?
Split it in half. Oh, you'd need another extrusion. Yeah, I know what you mean. Okay, so yeah, so let's say we want half of it to stick up. Yeah,
Okay.
so technically we'd need another extrusion, but I'll show you a good trick to save you some time. So I've got it selected. I'm going to go to Edit Extrusion and then select the shape.
Okay.
Right? And then I'll go to Copy to Clipboard up here. Then I'll finish it and I'll go and make another extrusion. And then this time, I'm not going to draw it. I'm going to go to paste and then just choose align to current view. And that will give me a copy of the shape for this new extrusion. Now, I could, of course, just go to, I'll show you another way. Okay, I could have just used pick lines as well. So I can use pick lines and get a similar result. Now, the reason I didn't do that's a good thing to know. Pick lines normally is great in this situation, but the problem is now I wouldn't be able to adjust that spline. It's just a technical thing with spline. So the copying and pasting approach sometimes is better, but they're both good. So now I've got a new extrusion, and then I can take some parts away. Now, unfortunately, the spline still wasn't a good example because you can't easily edit splines. You can't even split them. So unfortunately, I'd have to show you too many tricks to get that to work. So what I'll do instead is I'll do a new extrusion and I'll just get some different heights. So just I'll just make a new one. So I'll make an extrusion then.
Would that be the same if you're changing the height for a wall?
Yes, yeah, exactly the same.
Okay.
Yeah. So here I'm just drawing it with arcs instead of splines. So arcs, you'll keep hearing me say if you can use arcs, it's preferable to using splines. For that reason I just showed you, editing splines is painful, even when it's possible. It's still very difficult. So this is my new shape. So let's pretend that's a piece of furniture. And then I want that to be one height. So again, back in my section, let's put it to the height of the reference plane since we've got it. And then I want another part that sticks up at a different height. So now I'll go back to my plan. Oops, sorry, not there. This one. Okay, so then again, I'll go and make a new extrusion and then again, pick lines and then just pick all of the parts that I want that go up higher. And then I might draw the part that's different just separately. So this is going to be the raised part. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll just finish it and then go into my section and then stretch this part up to the higher level. Now, still haven't finished it. I'm going to show you one last great little thing. But I can't help it. It looks terrible at that height. I want this to be more like a counter, so I'm going to lower it all. But I'm sure you get the idea. You can easily, I'm sure, all work with the heights. So it's going to look, I think, a lot better though as a lower thing. So I'll finish that, and then I'm just going to show you if I select it and use this great option that I think maybe not everyone's seen. On the Modify tab, you have this selection box tool. So that's a great thing to make a view that's cropped around whatever you've got selected. So I can there show you easily how this looks now. So it's pretty clear that it's just two extrusions with one sitting on top of the other, but I want that to now read as one thing. So I'm going to hide this section box so that it's out of the way for the second. And then I'll go back and edit this. And I'm going to use join and choose those two extrusions. And now they read as one. So is that what you mean, having two things at different heights or two parts of it at different heights?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Thank you.
Yeah, spot on.
And that would be like the same thing for an actual wall, correct?
Yes, exactly the same. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
you can
sweet.
always,
Thank
so
you.
just, yeah. So really important though that everyone realizes with model in place, if you choose walls for the category, Revit still thinks it's a wall. But then that way you can use extrusions and other things to make your walls. And that way you can make things like this that you couldn't make with the regular wall tool. So that's also, yeah, but that's good if you think about things like that. That's good. Yep, sure. So anyone else got any other questions?
Danny?
Yes, sure.
It won't let me set a work plane, for instance.
But when you set a work plane, how are you doing it?
So I'm following what you said.
Yeah.
and it won't let me set a work plane. So you know how when you go to, so you make a new section and you go a component and you model in place.
Yeah. Yep.
And then it asks you to select a work plane.
Yes.
It won't let me select the back wall that I'm trying to work on.
Okay, so when you choose pick a plane.
Yep. So I'll do it now as well.
Yep.
Yes.
Click OK.
Pick a plane. Yep.
Yeah. Then you need to make sure that that select by face option's turned on.
Oh, how do I do?
Yeah. So down the bottom right, it's I think it's the, what is it? 1, 2, 3, third button. Yeah. So make sure that's turned on, and that should make it much easier to pick the wall.
Okay. Oh, right.
Yeah. That's probably what it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No worries. Yep, sure. No problem. All right. So any other questions, or it's all good? I might finish that recording anyway.